Terrific job to the director. And of course his incredible subject. What was the, if I can start and then if you want us to let it open to the audience, but what was your inspiration for doing this film? You weren't just a hired gun, you were very motivated to do the work on Brian, isn't that right?
That's a question for me?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be part of, I mean, Brian's connected to his bloodline in a way artistically, it goes all the way back to the origins of modern art, you know, Picasso, etc., all of those guys, and then onto the British side, which was Barbara Hepworth and Ben Nicholson. They were very much connected to that origins of modern art, and then that comes right through Brian, and he's probably one of the last of us who have in that bloodline. And so to be even sitting here today as part of that enormous, incredible art movement, you know, and then that went into the abstract expressionists from New York, which is my favorite period of art ever. I just completely love it. That was my inspiration, really. It's an honor to be sitting with this guy and working with him.
Well, you created a wonderful legacy, no matter what, so I'm sure Brian is honored. What was it like seeing yourself up on the screen, Professor Wall?
Well, I think the guy that played me was really good.
You're stunned double.
You know, it's strange. It really is sort of a bit unnerving, in a way, to sit there and kind of look at yourself. The kind of interesting thing for me is, as I was sitting there and everything, I was thinking of what I want to do, kind of thing, is not what I've done. It was strange because I forget who was it. Somebody in the film said, I think it's George Newman or somebody. It was like somebody was sounding as if I'd come to the end. You know, this is the end of the Odyssey in a kind of way, the end of the journey. And the interesting thing has been is the pandemic, you know, which has thrown everything into a kind of like a rethink thing of how we live and what happened to us and you know, how fragile everything really is. And you know, you know, we couldn't get hold of stainless steel from Italy, and so I had to change it again a little bit. And I've been working in some stuff called architectural bronze, but it's really kind of like a cheap brass or something. But anyway, with Grant, Irish and myself, we managed to conquer the difficulties of using what is called a dirty material, dirty metal. And you know, I kind of moved on, and the pandemic has kind of slowed me down in a kind of way, and I've been doing a lot of work on paper, and I was kind of sitting there looking at that thing and then thinking what I've done in the last 3 years, and I kind of, you know, I kind of feel it as I'm just still moving on. I'm still going and looking as it were, my life. You know, is slightly unsettling. You know, I'm only 91, and you know, I just took a lease out on a building for 10 years. And my wife Sylvia said she thought it was a bit pushing the envelope a little bit, but you know, I said to Graham, I said, have you got 10 years left in you? And he said, yes. I said, well, let's go. So that's how I feel. And you said, you know, I suppose I've got a slight disconnect, if you know what I mean. Because, you know, I still feel, you know, I've got a lot to do, you know, a lot to say, a lot to think about, you know, and you think, you know, as an artist, I mean, as a person, you know, I still think about, you know, the political situation, you know, what involving, you know, the things that's happening in the world and stuff like that. You've got, you know, everything goes on. It's just, you know, life goes on, and I'm, you know, part of it still, I hope, in that way.
Yes. So this film is to be continued. ...
But I don't want another film.
Would we like to open it up a little bit for some questions
I
and comments?
wanted to ask Peter, when did you start working on this film without Brian, and how did you meet him?
Well, it started because I was working with Alex, who's in the audience here, Alex Turnbull, his father's William Turnbull, and we were working together on the documentary film on William Turnbull, Beyond Time, and one of the interviewees in that film was Brian. And so that's how I first met Brian. I remember flying in, I was living in California, and I flew in, Brian was in London, so we swapped places in a way. And I turned up jet lag and fell asleep behind the camera, which Brian had a little go at before, so sorry about that. So it was really through William Turnbull's film that I got to know Brian's work, and of course the two are so connected from London in the 60s.
Well, actually, what he said was, you've taken up so much of my time that I think I've got a movie about your work.
That's right.
Questions of the audience?
So did you start shooting this movie in 2016?
Yeah, it was about 2015. Cyril and Brian invited me and my wife Camilla, who was presenting the film, to fancy dinner in Beverly Hills at a very fancy restaurant, and it was lovely. And then they asked, would we make a documentary film on the life and time of Brian Moore? So we started about 2015, and you know, it wasn't full time, but we would come back, and so over the next 5 years we would shoot in London, in the Bay Area mainly. And then by the time we were almost getting to finish, the pandemic happened, so that put a bit of a skid to everything. It slowed everything down, but that's kind of nice as well, because it's good. You don't normally get that opportunity to be able to have a break, in this case it was 2 years, and then come back to a project, and then you can see it fresh, and then finish it off. And I think we were supposed to be here a couple of years ago, were we, to do this festival? And so we're here now, and none of us are masked, which is nice. And yeah, so that was it really. I suppose about a 5-year period for this documentary.
Yeah. Does anybody in the audience have questions for Brian or Peter?
It's sort of a question, more of something I noticed, which is how beautifully the film wove Brian's story with Brian's work and the art with the cultural and historical narrative of, you know, that whole period and all the other artists. And even the soundtrack, I just found that really extraordinary, the different layers and how it kept moving in and out. And I noticed in the credits that Sylvia wrote the script, which I thought was really, really beautiful. The narrative was just the way the whole story and the art came together. So I wondered if, when you were constructing it, did you have this, you know, idea of how you wanted the film to be shaped, what the story was going to be? I mean, obviously it's Brian's story, but, you know, the arc of it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he lived through extraordinary times.
He did.
You know, and, you know, the 60s, civil rights, Vietnam War. I think it didn't make the movie, but when Brian first arrived at Berkeley, there were smoke bombs going off and gas bombs from tear gas, yeah. So, and then he was like, no, and he headed back to England. He was like, no, I'm not doing this. And so that, yeah, I mean, the political and social element, which Brian mentioned before, is integral, because, you know, I've always felt that art is not decoration, it's to create social transformation. And that I really saw in Brian's work, even though you don't need to put up a political statement, but it's in there anyway, because he lived through that. And, you know, long as we have issues, and the issues haven't really advanced that much, unfortunately, hopefully future artists will continue that tradition of portraying social and political circumstances through their arts. In terms of putting it together, Brian used to play trumpet, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's a trumpeter too. So, and his love of bebop, jazz was, you know, and I'm just, bebop is just, you know, abstract expressionism and bebop were my two big loves as well. So to see that, and Brian's influence of that era of bebop, which was just before the abstract expressionists, I just thought the two were so entwined. And then, as he went through from England into America, and he became really a part of the American culture, and I love that scene where he's wearing the cowboy hat, and you know, then I thought, well, let's get some slide guitar in there, and just, you know, it's a musical journey as well as a sculptural journey. And one thing also, there was big segments of the film that didn't have any music. I didn't know what to put there. So I'm a piano player as well. So the piano pieces I just couldn't find the piano music. So I knew I could hear it in my head. So I just sat down and for 3 days just came up with a lot of improv piano, and that's all the piano that you hear in the film.
Great.
I really like the opening where you have all that footage of the bombing of England, you know, in the very beginning of the film. I think that sets such a important tone to, you know, Brian's childhood, and just, you know, when your art is such a response to your environment and your experiences.
Absolutely, and the way Brian was saying, and I don't think Brian was consciously saying this at the time, but the way he was talking about the Blitz in London and the bombing and the noise, and then cut 50 years later to his studio in Oakland, and you know, it's like a bomb going off in there. It's really loud, and you know, there's fire and you know, the chains, and I think it was Camilla who sort of got the connection of the two, of that. You know, here it came back in full circle back again, his early childhood experiences, and it came back into the studio all those years later. So I don't know if you were conscious of that, Brian, but it's definitely there to see.
The other thing that's very strange that's happened is that the British Library are doing an oral history of my life, and I've been doing it with a woman in London, you know, Zooming, and I've just been going through what it was like in London during the Blitz, and being taken away from your parents to be evacuated into the country. And those experiences, and looking at this, looking at the film again of the Blitz again, sort of was sort of a double take for me in a strange kind of way. It was strange coming out of the ghetto in London and being evacuated to Yorkshire, and milking a cow was really quite a cultural jump, which I don't think I've got over yet. But anyway, you know, it's all part of one's makeup in a kind of strange kind of way that goes backwards and forwards. But the lovely thing for me was that the last show that saw was that was one of the last shows that Peter Seltz put on before he passed on. And the marvelous thing, we took Peter to the studio to see this film just before it was the final, not this, but nearly the final take. And you know, he was 100 years old. And we brought him into the studio and put him in front of a big television, and of course he instantly fell asleep. And the film was going, and all of a sudden he heard his own voice. He woke up and said, "Marvelous." It was just a marvelous moment with Peter. It was absolutely fantastic.
I mean, for me, it was great to meet Peter Seltz, because I studied at California Institute of the Arts, just outside Los Angeles. And when it came to German, expressionism, it's all about Peter Seltz, really, as being the person to reveal to the world that amazing art movement, which was really abstract expressionism before it happened. And so when Sylvia said, "Okay, you're going to go and interview Peter Seltz in his house in Berkeley," I was kind of starstruck a little bit. And it was just a lovely, lovely experience. And that's the great thing with documentaries. You get to meet these amazing people, and you learn the subject matter from, out of the horse's mouth, so to speak. And it's almost like taking a PhD on the subject, making these films. And Peter Seltz is wonderful. And then to see him co-curate the shows, We're in the Circle, with Brian, just the full circle, and that's again the bloodline of modern art, of which Peter Seltz is obviously a major part of.
Can I just chime in here, because I just wanted to say, first of all, the film looks incredible after having watched it the first time round when it was shown online on the laptop, so it looks incredible to see it, like the actual print of the film. But I just wanted, it was more of a comment than a question, is how important these films are, where right now everything is so documented and over-documented, and both for Brian's life and I know for Bill's life, and Pete and I spent 5 years making Beyond Time, and uncovering these things that just were kind of just hidden, and these incredible moments that formed the kind of history of part of 20th century art, and a lesser known aspect of maybe the British side of that as well. I think it's like really important that these documents exist now, because I think that's a really great testament to kind of the stuff that you've been doing, Pete, and we've been working on these things, and they're real labours of love. But I think that these stories are really important to be there for the future generations, because I know I'm a sort of offspring of two artists, and the only thing I was told by my parents, the only thing I couldn't do was be an artist, because you could never be able to make a living being an artist, and that sort of is indicative of the 40s, 50s and 60s, and how art was then, and how it was to be an artist. It was to be an outsider, and that sort of aspect doesn't really exist anymore, because art has kind of become very much an insider occupation. And so I just think that, I just think it's a really, really brilliant film, really brilliantly narrated, and I think it's really important that these stories are there for these generations of people now to be able to see and reference in terms of what being an artist and being a creative, and the struggles that people had to go through, in order to be able to achieve that.
Absolutely, and I mean, one of the original inspirations for this film, which Sylvia very much stated from the outset, was that it's an educational film, and it's a film to enlighten people who don't know the history, and in some ways, if you don't know your past, it's really difficult to deal with your present and move on into the future, and to also realise that these guys and gals back then opened the doors for us, and it happens in all the art mediums, it happens in sports, it happens in many aspects of culture. These amazing individuals have walked down this line almost blindfolded, because you know there was no encyclopedia about how to do this. They just went ahead and did it, and you know, and in a way, the last thing they had on their mind was fame and fortune. They were just hard-working artists, and you know, you see more today that fame and fortune comes into the potential aspect of being an artist for younger people, and I get it, but I don't get it. And to really see the struggle that it is, in a beautiful way, a life struggle, to make the art. And fame, yeah, if you get the fame and fortune, great. If you don't, great. You just made your art. And I think it was John Cowell at the end, he said, just keep on doing it. Yeah. And that is really the biggest inspiration for me about this. And Brian got it from Barbara about how to be an artist. And he's passed that on to me. And so with this film, hopefully I'm passing it on to a whole new generation.
Hello, I just wanted to also point out that was Alex Turnbull, William Turnbull's son, that is here. And also here is who spoke earlier too, is Gabrielle Seltz, who's Peter Seltz's daughter. So we're very happy to have them both come representing their parents.
And thank you for all being here today. Thank you very much.
Is that all there is?
No, 10 more years.
Yeah.
10 more
Yeah,
years.
let me ask.
10 more years.
Let me ask Brian one more question. It's the impression that comes across in the film is of your energy and your productivity. What is your studio practice schedule like? What is a typical day or week for you in the studio?
Well, you know, I get up at 4:45 in the morning, get to the studio at 6 every day, but now 5 days a week. I used to do 7. And you know, I have a structure. It's just a straightforward structure. I get to the studio. You know, I make coffee. I grab the New York Times. I read a little bit. You know, that you really get you sort of upset. You know, and then I look. My main thing is, you know, the problem. What I'd like to do, and mostly I can do, and how it evolves is, I like to look at what I did yesterday, and I'd sort of get the coffee going, and then I'd look at what I've done, and if I can, when I look at it, if I really don't understand how it happened, how it evolved, then you know, then I'm really happy. You know, I want to be able to feel that what I did, I didn't quite know what I was doing, and so it kind of it wasn't involved in something that I preconceived. I want it just to happen. And I know it looks very strange, looking at big pieces of steel, you know, and things like that, that they have to, you know, for me, I have to be able to look at them. I don't know how I did it. I want to have that kind of surprise of going into the studio in the morning with nobody there, it's silence, and normally it's dark, with just, you know, just a few lights on, and just to see that that I am surprised of what I've done. You know, that there's somehow that a miracle might have happened. It doesn't always happen. You know, I look at what I've done, thinking, yeah, I've done that before. It's what I want always. I think about everything. I want to be surprised. I want to be sort of jerked, you know, say, wow, how the hell did I do that? That's what I want every morning. I don't get it every morning, But that's what I like to do, you know, how did that come about? And that's the beauty, you know, it's like, you know, when you're walking down the street and you suddenly see things that you haven't noticed before, and you think, wow, look at that, that's, you know, something's happening there. You know, you know, it's like when you make a mark. When you make a drawing or you have a piece of steel, it doesn't matter. You have one and you mark it, and then it's not that, you know, it's not that important, just one marker. But then when you put another mark next to it or juxtaposition to that mark, then all of a sudden you get some sense that something's happening, something's buzzing, something's going on, and then you can make another mark, and all of a sudden some magic starts happening. And that's what that's what I want for me to happen. That every day perhaps there's some kind of magic in your life. You know, when you look at somebody, you look at something, or somebody says something, you read something. You know, that's how that's how I try and live. You know, like when you live with somebody or something, and you look at them sometimes in a slightly different way, and they look, 10 times as beautiful as they did before. You know, those kind of magic moments, they don't last for long, but maybe they shouldn't last for long. But you know, it just that's how I look at what I try and make and what I try and do. I just try and be in the moment. I think that's what it is. You know, I don't care about the past too much. I don't care about the future. It's impossible. But just to live in the moment and feel that when you make that first mark, that's the moment, and then you make the second mark, you're still in the moment. And I think that's what making art is about. And living is about like that too. You know, being able to go, have a meal with somebody or do something and live in the moment. Just take each moment and enjoy it. You know, it's because life is incredibly short. That's how I try and live. I don't live like that all the time, obviously, but I try and have those moments. And I get more of those moments when I make art than I do in the real world, because the real world can be pretty cruel occasionally. But that's how I try and see it. I mean, even like moments like this where I can't see a thing. The lines in my eyes, and I've got macular degeneration. I can't see, but I'm in the moment. I'm here with you all, and that's magic.